Well, hello, welcome to my painting channel. Today I'm going to be doing a watercolour of some trees, and I decided that I would have one real focused tree and I'd keep the background fairly muted. Here's the reference photograph. As you can see, it's quite complicated. I particularly like the way the shadows were falling across the foreground tree, so that's what I'm going to be concentrating on. I'm muting the background down to an almost pastel effect of stippling, and then I'm honing in on quite a carefully drawn underdrawing, line drawing. I'll be working watercolour on Saunders Waterford 300 gram paper. So the whole palette is fairly muted, and I'm quite like that. It's something I wanted to experiment with on this particular work. So I start by putting in very light pastel tones and colours, keeping everything quite muted, but paying attention to warms and cools, so you can see the cool shadows going in there. Particularly like the way that the shadows moved across the trunk of the tree. Beech trees are particularly beautiful, and when they're bare of leaves, they have a very elegant shape, and they do when they're in bloom as well, when they have their full leaf. But there's something particularly lovely and delicate about the shapes that they create, especially when contrasted to a uncomplicated background. So I wanted to isolate this particular tree as much as possible and concentrate on it, rather than having a very complicated background. It's a bit of an experiment, but I quite enjoyed doing this and playing around with things. It doesn't matter whether it works or not, but hopefully it will, and I just crack on with it. So I'm putting in some darker tones, and then the modelling is very important on something like this. You have to look for those half tones. You have to look for the area that turns away between dark and light, the area where the tones are very subtle, because that's what helps it to model into something more believably three-dimensional. So it's something like this. It's always a bit of a gamble as to when to stop, because there's imagination involved with the background. You have to exercise a bit of restraint, not let it get out of hand, not let it get too far. I find that quite difficult to do, because it's knowing how to make it into a graphically visual success, and there's always a temptation to keep going and keep going. But you learn from experience. So works like this, experimental pieces, can help with more finished paintings. So if I go on to do a larger production, maybe an oil painting of this subject matter, then I'll already have some prepared ideas, and I'll be able to eliminate certain things that maybe didn't work in this. The original tree on the photograph, and in reality, is at Cadbury Hill fort, and it's on an embankment, and here I'm just sort of hinting at that embankment, which maybe I didn't want to before, and that I thought it needed something else in the background. So you can see my setup here. I've got my incline board, got my palette, water pot, rags to wipe the brush. I always have the radio on. It's a very cosy studio. So I'm suggesting a tree behind, just to offset the composition slightly. Maybe it was better before without that, maybe it's better with it. It's one of those push me pull you things, a matter of taste. And the beauty of making a video is you can review different periods of the painting. You can go back and forwards and say what you thought looked better and what didn't. So making a video has quite a lot of value to me. I think this particular tree's got quite a small foot, or bowl as it's called, and maybe it's a little lightweight at the bottom, so I could emphasize that in a future version if I wanted to. And bearing that in mind, I emphasised the shadow behind the tree and made a kind of arc of light falling upon the bowl and roots, just to emphasise that bottom and make a bit more of it. Added a touch of red earth just to highlight that bottom of the tree and bring it a bit more into focus. So there's that area of focus, and there's the shadow area, and the curve of the trunk. Those are the two main areas of focus, and they're the interest points. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe and share with friends.